Half an hour. Great. Okay. So we came up with some questions.
Okay, and you gotta talk louder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because the microphone is over there. So our goal behind recording this.
Really? Gotcha. Did you hear in Black Box?
Theater voice?
Oh my god.
I wasn't here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you missed it. She was amazing.
I was in South America.
You missed it.
So speaking from my tummy voice.
There you go.
Do your Persephone voice.
That's really okay. It was also really sick. Sorry, Marcos. Our goal behind filming this conversation is to include as many voices as possible in our write-up. Because when Colleen and I were starting our write-up of this project for our class, we realized that we couldn't really talk about it without other people involved. So this is our goal of sort of including more perspectives on the project and getting some more ideas about where to take it next. So the first question is just if you guys can quickly go around one by one and just say your name, your background, which story you worked on, and in what capacity.
What do you mean my background?
Like who are you?
I'm trying to figure out what turban to wear at this particular game. You give me a little. I've got too many identities.
Great, then that's perfect. Would you like to start? Just because that's a good example of what this thing is all about. Is like there are too many things to contain in one.
Yeah. Okay. So Sukvinder Vinning. I've got a lot of different roles that I think I play within the communities, that I'm involved with. I would guess at the very end of it, I'm a change maker, if that makes any kind of sense, more on the grassroots level, and my interest is connection between people, and how that connection can help us collaborate better, feel safer, to be able to be more creative, and actually start rowing in the same direction in terms of problem solving. Not to say that we have to get there the same way, if that makes sense. You can have all kinds of solutions. So we met because of a young adult project that we did last year, and again, just that teaching leadership skills and wanting university students to leave with some great information and connections, as well as skill sets as they lead, as they just lead, period, whether in the university level or elsewhere.
Great.
What else did you want? What do I do? There was something else.
Brief explanation of your sort of story, just as.
Okay, so I think one of the people that told my story, and it was on. Gosh, honestly, you asked a question and it kind of just went from there, right? And I think of a challenge and sort of overcoming adversity was sort of I think the theme of what we talked about. Yeah.
Perfect. Right. Nice.
My name's Madison. Who am I?
Yeah.
I guess I'm a theater artist. I'm in my third year of the performance program at SFU. Also a barista.
Great.
Unfortunately. Okay. Anything else?
Can you sort of give a brief recap of the piece that you made?
Right, yeah. So I worked on Seisha's story, and throughout the experience, I guess at the beginning, you guys asked me to just make a piece, I think is what you said. You said just make a piece.
Something.
Make a thing.
Yeah.
Make a piece based on the story that Seisha has given to us. And so I got a copy of her story and a copy of the op-ed. And based on that, I was supposed to make a piece of theater based on the idea of representation, I guess, or just with that in mind. So I created a sound piece, collaborating with my friend Kate, and I had a couple little props to go with it, and I did a performance.
Can you explain what those props look like?
Cardboard face pieces. I had a man face, and I had big red lips.
Mm-hmm.
I had an eye.
An eyebrow.
An eyebrow. I had an ear.
A nose.
I had a nose.
Yeah, that was it.
And they were made of stir sticks.
Not popsicle sticks.
It's established many times. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what the audio sounded like? Or how it was constructed?
Yeah, so we took Kate and I, so we requested the audio of the op-ed as well as the audio of her speaking her story, and what we did is we took the two and kind of created one piece. And initially and yeah, lots of and so originally, I guess her op-ed was her discussing the recent election and the way that it affected her as an Indigenous person, and her thoughts on the way that Canada kind of as a whole decided that, you know, voting was the most important thing that you could possibly do in a democracy, and that was what was like going to define us as a democracy and kind of as a country, and kind of her take on that, and we just messed it up. We really did.
In a good way.
I guess, but what we did is we took what she was saying and we made it the opposite of what she was saying. And initially, like, I know I talked about this before. Is this too long?
No, it's
Like,
good.
okay.
Mm-mm.
Because initially, what I wanted to do was obviously to make her point,
Mm-hmm.
and to take what she had said and to kind of like push it through and to like edit it down but make it clear what she was saying, just through the text that we had. And as we were doing it, I realized that how bad that was, and like I was kind of like trying to help her make her point when I think someone said during the discussion like it had already been made.
Mm-hmm.
And I fully realized that, and Kate and I just stopped, and I kind of had like a moment, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do right now. Like, this is impossible. And it's horrible that was, you know, what I felt like I needed to do, and I don't know, it was really awful. It was an awful experience to realize that was what I was trying to do, and yeah. And then we kind of realized that was what the piece was about, right? It was about the media and the way that they take stories,
Mm-hmm.
and what they do with those stories,
Mm-hmm.
and how they have this power for some reason and this ability to take something and completely change it and to make it whatever they want it to be. And we do that all the time with stories. You know, I mean, yeah, it's everywhere. So that was kind of when her and I realized, like, oh my God, like that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be doing this exaggerated version of what the media does all the time, you know, and rather than, you know, I mean, I was trying to do it really earnestly, but rather than trying to say what she had already said, we said something else, I think is what ended up happening. Yeah.
Cool.
No worries.
Dene?
So I'm Dene Cho, Dene Thompson, Deschaux people, Northwest Territories. More about myself, or what was the next part of the question?
How do you want to identify?
Well, it's complicated. identify as an identity in conflict. I identify primarily with my Dene culture, but I grew up in an urban situation separated from a lot of that. So it brings up a lot of complicated questions that I think are very prevalent in society today, that aren't discussed as openly as they could be. I think we work a lot in binaries in our ways of viewing others. And so as an othered person that doesn't fit in a binary system, the potential to be further othered from the others exists. It's very complicated. Lots of fun. So, you know, I'm a theater artist and producer and writer, etc. I guess that's my career. My involvement with this was I worked on Stacia's piece as well. I had the great pleasure of such a generous offering with what she gave us as a story, but also, no, Madison, you didn't get the support of knowing Stacia, but...
I got no support.
Yeah.
Is what I got.
Yeah, but through my moments of crisis, of representing her story, she was very helpful and very generous and gave a lot of space, which I think in some way actually is a critical failure in this representation of the media, because it doesn't accurately represent the media necessarily, at least large media. Her generosity was more generous than anything that requires finances or profitability or any of those things that the media thrives on. So there's an interesting critique there. But my piece, my interpretation, I unsurprisingly had an affinity to Stacia's story of this dual identity and that crisis of living a colonizer life but feeling like the colonized and being in between whatever that struggle is. And I have lived experiences that are similar. So what I did with my piece was I explored two things primarily. One was the representation, so I used Stacia's words to tell a story that I had of my lived experience of that duality, that reality of being ostracized from both Aboriginal and settler white kind of communities and feeling isolated and alone, which I think I ran into my biggest artistic question there, because at some point I was hijacking her story to tell my own story, which was the closest I came to understanding the metaphor I was playing for media. Also helped me realize that representation is inherently problematic, no matter how you cut it. It's problematic. And so there's a lot of discussion around when it's okay and problematic, and when it's not okay and problematic. Not to suggest absolution. And then intimacy was something I explored, and I had us all come in our circle, into a little hand-holding circle. And I knew some people might be uncomfortable holding each other's hands, so I passed her along some hand sanitizer to distract them from the fact that they actually would indeed be holding each other's hands. And I didn't give them a choice. I just said, here, I've solved your first problem for you. Hold hands. Here's the game. And actually, really, really joyously had the reaction from one of the audience members that she was incredibly uncomfortable with physical intimacy in that way. And it was a non-romantic intimacy, it was just human intimacy. But she knowingly and in some way enjoyed playing that game and went for it and was at least curious about her experience of discomfort, which is interesting to me. And then like I say, I kind of told my story, but with mostly Stacia's words. And that was my piece.
So Colin and I should also talk about our interpretation, because we ended up representing Sukhvinder's story, partially due to the fact that a performer had to drop out, but we also, Theatre Voice, we ended up being sort of a representation of the producer-creator media that both chooses the story that's going to be told and then dictates how it's going to be represented. So do you want to explain what we did?
Sure. So we had a voice recording of Sufindra's story, which we kind of pulled the parts that spoke most to us. We used repetition slightly, not to an extreme level, but we did use repetition to highlight some points that really grabbed us. And we got everyone to pull out their phones and film themselves, which was a really interesting dynamic. People were very uncomfortable. Even though it's an object we live with and it's in our hands how many hours of the day, they felt very uncomfortable, even though it was their own phone to view themselves and know it was recording themselves. People also struggled with, we told them to film them and they weren't too sure whether to look. They had this internal struggle of like continuously looking at their reaction to the sound and being in the space, or whether they should look up and avoid their phone and just look at what was going on. And Lily and I started with some quite like minimal movement, and eventually we stood up and used the space and started dancing a slight bit. Then the next part of our performance, we called each other and kind of mimicked the first interaction we had with Sigvinder, which was so lovely. And we found, even though it wasn't part of the recorded story, it really was, it showed a side of her, and we wanted to show the audience that. And we eventually got everyone up, standing up and hugging, which I think was the change in the dynamic of the room was just so lovely. And we watched the recording. My dad does not have a phone, so he used Lily's phone, and we watched that a couple days ago, and it was so lovely just hearing the sounds and like, cause everyone kind of dropped the phone and started hugging, and it was just a really cool dynamic, and I think a good way to start off this very intense conversation about stuff.
Yeah. And part of that idea we definitely got from Dene of the physical contact. Because it ended up, I think in both performances, really changed the energy in the room.
Yeah.
When you get people physically connected. I'm just worried because it only does half an hour at a time.
Starting in what?
Half an hour?